why should any of us care about an economic development report? Let me offer a suggestion that might reach you both from the perspective of head and heart. W. Edwards Deming, who was born this week in 1900, is one of the more important systems thinkers in the history of business. And he was quoted as saying, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And so, thank you for the laugh, I appreciate it. And so Professor Deming gives us insight into how that can reach us on an intellectual level. Of course, the heart is another matter. Why could such a report help us tell a story about the heart? Well, I would argue that one of the pursuits that separates the bioindustry from all others is the desire to ease human suffering and improve quality of life. After all, discovery is a process that is slow and challenging, and it often involves hundreds or thousands of failures before achieving any kind of success. And so I see this report as an important tool to validate the time, talent, and treasure invested in bringing clinical solutions to our friends and neighbors. So with that background, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the panel this afternoon. And I'd like to be sure to thank you for your willingness to be here and participate. And we're going to be asking you to participate throughout. So Penny Patterson, the Vice President of Communications with Promega. Brian Riley, the Vice President of Operations with Catalent Pharma Solutions. Michael Tendick, Market Sector Vice President, Healthcare Life Sciences with Plexus. And Peter Ullrich, CEO and President of Titan Spine. Okay, so I'm going to assume my position here, and we're going to start with questions. We would ask you to be thinking of yours. You know, Penny, I think I'd like to start with you because we're talking a lot about a number of topics today, including, economic development report, but I know that a topic that you're passionate about is education. And so I'm kind of curious if you can talk about the importance of education to the future of your respective business and the kinds of employees that you're looking for now and into the future.
Yes. Education for us lives at multiple levels, and it's important to Promega, and I think all the companies. We start with just the recruiting side of things. As I was talking to my colleagues at Promega this past week, anticipating our conversation today, the notion of recruiting people who want to come here and want to stay here, they want to know there's a good education system. So that's number one. The notion of collaboration is huge. We're celebrating our first 40 years as Promega. So we've had a really wonderful relationship with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and to be able to see the kind of collaboration that comes today and discovering new territory together is exciting. So that's number two, and that doesn't even get to your question yet about employees.
Yeah.
And that comes in multiple ways. It comes both in terms of the complexities that our jobs have, and more jobs are emerging that way from any place you go in the company. The complexity of the work is getting greater. And so the need for more learning, more understanding is increasing. But also, we work with a number of the tech groups around the community to try to align talent. So our machine shop uses the same gear that they use over at Madison College so that we can start to integrate people familiar with the same kind of tools. So it comes in all these different aspects, and so for us, education is critical to our success.
Thank you. So Mike, when I use the phrase supply chain, yep. Can you offer insights as to what that means as a practical matter and what success looks like from your perspective when it comes to the biotechnology industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, Plexus is nearly a $3 billion company overall, and we serve the healthcare life sciences sector. It's about $1 billion of revenue, working with 30 of the 40 largest OEMs in the world and numerous other smaller companies as well. So when companies come to us, they are highly dependent on our ability to support their supply chain. Many of these companies, from some younger startups all the way to monstrous conglomerates like GE Healthcare, go, hey, Plexus, we need you to ensure our product is delivered day in and day out to our facilities, because ultimately these things do need to get to patients. A key part of it is quality. So though we are the supplier to, say, GE and some of these other large OEMs, one of the challenges and one of the things we always have to be sure of is we've got to act just like that product. The GE product with their name on it is a Plexus product. So you may not see Plexus's name out there, but probably nearly everybody in this room has either been scanned by an ultrasound, if you've got a relative with an implanted cardiac defibrillator, they have used that specific product that's been manufactured at one of the Plexus's facilities, potentially even right up in Neenah, Wisconsin.
Thank you. So Peter, I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about your business, but also ask you, when you consider the role of innovation in your current business model, what do you wish was better understood about innovation for those of us that may not be spending day to day in your line of work or in industry?
All right, so in our industry, we're not quite 3 billion yet, but we're trying to get there. So we're a small, innovative spine fusion company. We make a medical device that when we take out a disc inside, when I say we, I'm a former spine surgeon, and I invented this while I was practicing. And we would take that disc out, we'd put in the interbody device to hold the two bones apart, and then try to get them to grow together. In our industry, the most prevalent material for doing this was a piece of plastic, which to me as a practicing surgeon didn't make any sense. So we started doing research on titanium. Titanium turns out is much more bone friendly. Now we have a biomimetic surface that we can actually influence the body's stem cells to start the whole fusion process and go back and tell the host that this is where we need to fuse. And I think in terms of innovation, I think it was said best by the last speaker at lunch, when you get an idea, you got to stick with it, and you got to be persistent. I was told for many years that this was a dumb idea. We right now are getting back our first clinical results in comparison to plastic and the rest of the industry, and we're reducing the amount of post-op narcotics by up to 70%, both in what they're taking and whether or not they're even on narcotics. So it turns out if you can trigger the body's own system to start healing, they heal far faster. But this was not going to come about throughout a normal channel that wants to protect the status quo, which was plastic.
Yeah. What was the timeline between I have an idea and my idea successfully went into the first patient?
2004, over coffee and a napkin.
Yeah.
And first one went in 2004. I didn't own it at the time. Another company owned it. I bought it back from them, though, in 2006 with my best friend from high school. So, again, like the last speaker, there was 2 people in the room that started the company. Fortunately, I wasn't one of them. It was my friend and a recent grad from Marquette University in biomedical engineering. So that's who started the company, and she's still with us. They're both still with us today, but she's now got 14 papers and has pretty much changed the industry in terms of how we look at healing.
Very exciting. So Brian, I'm going to call on you to talk a little bit about your business, and Penny, I'm going to ask you to do the same when we come back to you in a minute. Brian, when you think about biotech in the state of Wisconsin and what we're doing when it comes to development, how do you think we better position the state for the work that's taking place in biohealth, and how do we think about driving toward the future?
Sure, great question, Matt. Just a few comments on Catalent, and I'll come back to that. So Catalent is a global business, publicly traded entity, 35 sites globally, about 11,000 employees. We're the largest pure play contract development manufacturing organization in the market today. We play anywhere from oral solid dose, soft gel, to biologics, and been a great organization to work with over the last 4 years. To come back to Wisconsin, for those of you who had a chance to look at the economic impact report over lunch, had fantastic results. 107,000 positions in the state, 4,300 businesses. However, I will tell you, from a U.S. perspective, that represents about 6% of the population and 5% of the businesses. So I still think there's an opportunity to continue to build on that and grow the biohealth network within Wisconsin. A few thoughts that I would offer on how we can do that. Continue to leverage incubator space at the university as we have. Continue to expand hands-on applied science training programs like we have at Madison College. And continue to leverage the relationships we have with the great academic research institutions like University of Wisconsin.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, Penny, ask you to talk about your business a little bit, and I'm going to ask for questions. And the good news for everyone in the audience is when you're sitting up here, you all have an incredible halo effect. So I'm expecting incredible angelic kinds of questions that come from you in a minute. So Penny, please tell us more about
Right, I never really talked about Promega in general. So been here 40 years, really making tools, biotech tools. Started with the academic segment and reagents and went from there in understanding things at that molecular level. But today have really grown into serving a number of markets. So serve the pharmaceutical industry, certainly serve the GI, genetic identity, a la CSI industry, a number of applied markets in food and water, and certainly the emerging world of clinical diagnostics. So as a tool manufacturer, we're really fortunate to be able to grow and flex with the discovery of science and then bring new technologies to that discovery as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Questions from the audience. I know that there are team members that have microphones in front of them. You're probably going to have to wave your arms a little bit so that we can see you. So are there any questions? Okay, did I see somebody? Not yet. I've got lots of questions, but want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share.
It's after lunch, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, we'll keep going. All right, so I'm going to ask each of you to answer this. You know, when you think about your current business and you think about development, what is it that's currently keeping you up at night? We'll just sort of go in order this way. So Peter, we'll start with you.
Yeah, our biggest problem as an innovative and a very disruptive type of technology is market access. So, you know, the medical device industry is a third-party payer industry, very much dominated by hospitals, especially large GPOs and IDNs. And they try to pick things that they want to buy based on price, not based on efficacy. So, by far, market access is our biggest problem.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I'd kind of put it into two categories. I mean, the very first, as an outsourced design firm in manufacturing, is finding talent. There are so many projects that need to get done, and innovation is so critical in driving costs down in this industry. That is probably the number one thing, is finding talent. Our Neenah location, for instance, recruits out of the Midwest. We have other locations across the country. They tend to recruit out of the local universities and other companies nearby. But I think, again, we've hit this point, low unemployment, there's a major talent war. And then what that in turn does is, we have to be sure we're driving cost out of product for our customers while maintaining or improving the standard of care. A great example is, again, I mentioned the implanted cardiac defibrillator monitors. 20 years ago, those were $800 or more each. 10 years ago, they were down to about $200 each cost of goods sold. Now they're $50 or less. I mean, if you can knock, basically make it 1/16 the cost of what it initially was, whereas that's about what it's down to now. Those are ways to innovate and try to drive cost out of the medical market without lowering the standard of care. So those are the two things, and they really go hand in hand, talent and innovation.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I would echo Michael on the number one point for the access to talent. As a rapidly expanding business, it's talent and our people that drive the growth of that business. As Michael said, we're unemployment, it's the lowest rate since 1969. If you look at employment growth over the next 10 years, R&D is projected to grow at 19% versus the overall employment growth at 10%. So accessing that talent, retaining that talent, continuing to develop that talent is the number one challenge for me.
Penny?
Yeah, I have to echo that too. I mean, some of it's about recruitment. I have a couple other things too. But looking at recruitment and really appreciating folks like BioForward and groups who are trying to bring recruitment initiatives to a new level with networking. So kudos to you guys for working on that. But bringing in talent. The good news is that when people get here, they're like, oh, well, this is a cool place. And so what we have in terms of quality of life is really quite precious. And so to be able to get that word out a little bit more. So recruitment, most certainly. I was also in chatting with colleagues last week, someone had referenced the whole world of regulation in our world is very dynamic as a global company. And so to constantly be on top of what the latest regulations are, from the materials to the shipping, worldwide is becoming more energized all the time. And so that's something that we just keep an eye on.
Interesting. So Brian, I'll start with you with the next one. You know, when you think about the roles of others in the system that we operate in, so to build on Penny's point, state government, the legislature, WEDC or otherwise, you know, there are a lot of organizations that invested in the economic development report that you saw today. How would you describe their relationship with industry? How can it be better, and what can we do to make that happen?
Sure. So I can tell you, at Catalent in our 4 years, we've had a great relationship with the local government as well as WEDC. We've directly benefited from some of their incentive packages. We recently completed a $34 million expansion, 22,000 square feet, of which we were the recipient of a nice award from WEDC. So certainly they are present, they're involved, and I think it's having a positive impact. Again, I would say there's a room to do more. If I look at the company base here at 4,300 companies roughly throughout the state, representing, again, just 5% of the overall population in the U.S., we can certainly do more to not only foster the companies that are present. I would like to see us do more to actually recruit new companies in biohealth to Wisconsin, leverage our academic research institutions. And so to do that, I think we will have to be more aggressive on the economic incentive packages to mirror that you're seeing handed out in North Carolina, Georgia, certainly Massachusetts, and California.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to the audience again. Any questions from the audience? What was dessert? I didn't get a chance to eat it. All right. I think do we have a question? All right, please go ahead.
Is it on? Can I go? Hi, you mentioned that workforce is a challenge. Do you have internal training programs that you've developed to focus on your current employees to help them to provide you with what you need today and into the future?
I can, well,
All right, go ahead.
we can all
Penny,
just
please.
go
Yeah,
around,
kick us
go
off.
around.
Yeah, kick us around.
Well, I don't know where you were, but there, I think I saw a hand go. A part of what happens, at least at Promega, is people are really encouraged to pursue their interests. So I would say usually when people come in, they do have a skill set that's needed, but what happens more often than not is people grow into new roles and new positions, and that's where we would support them. So the incoming start with a skill set, but the opportunities for growth in terms of where you go next, you might even take a sort of divergent path. That's wide open for folks. That's kind of how we work it.
Anyone else want to take a shot?
Yeah, I mean, from a Plexus standpoint, you know, there's kind of different groups that we have to make sure that we're training, keeping up to date. So, you know, kind of starting with the engineering organization, there are constantly new technologies coming out. Some of it we do hire engineers in to bring that new capability. Others, I mean, we need people going out getting master's programs. It's only a 2-hour drive. We've had some people come down, do masters in engineering within Madison here, and again, we give them a couple days that they have some flexibility to come down and do that training. And then certainly with direct labor as well, the people working on our floor, it's absolutely critical that we keep upping their skill set. So some people that used to just, again, solder boards are now doing finished medical devices. Again, things that really, you know, they feel, they go, hey, this is critical. And they're really moving their career up in a rapid way. So, you know, we have to do both just because we are growing so quick as a company over the last, 5-10 years. So without that, you cannot hire all external talent. It just doesn't work, and eventually it's a recipe for disaster. So we have to have those internal training programs.
Interesting. Anything that you would like to share on that?
Yeah, we like to catch them when they're young. So we started them off in a co-op program, and we've had 2 co-ops or 3 co-ops a year for almost our whole existence, and most of our engineering has come through that co-op program, so it's been great.
Interesting. Anything, Brian?
Yeah, at Catalent, we see training and internal development as foundational to our business. Certainly, to Penny's comments, all new employees to Catalent go through our new employee training or indoctrination, if you will. There's a component of GMP, good manufacturing practices, good documentation, as well as understanding the infrastructure. We build on that from a technical perspective, leveraging our full resources of the network, everywhere from aseptic training to good manufacturing practices. We leverage our vendor network. We certainly leverage our engineering team and our downstream and upstream process scientists to really bring in all facets of that, and certainly we have individualized training development plans that can go above and beyond that and leverage outside resources as well. But it's something we invest a good portion of our P&L back into our training.
Interesting. Okay.
You know, that's
Thank you.
where I'll say too, that just that in terms of impact and education, what we started with, sometimes that training comes in partnership with the schools and colleges around you too. And so our lab technicians often will come from Madison College and some of the training there. So, you know, working with others who are really good at training and appreciating what the needs are so that they can launch folks both for employment at Promega as well as employment in other areas that need similar skills is a great way to go too. And we do that.
All right, thank you. I thought we maybe had a question over here as well.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Miguel from Ramirez Bio. Thanks again for all of you participating on the panel. Brian, you kind of touched on a few things Wisconsin could do better. So if the others could elaborate on that, but also kind of to turn it around, what does Wisconsin offer, either economically or academically, that does put us, above, states like North Carolina, California, Boston, Texas? Thank you.
So you've been with Plexus how long?
So I've been there a little over 20 years now as a graduate from UW-Madison.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go first.
Very good. Yeah, and I think, again, one of the big things is the very strong university system within the state. So University of Wisconsin-Madison, Marquette, MSOE, all have really good programs that are able to feed us across the state. I think the other thing is just the quality of life here. I know somebody mentioned Raleigh, or if you look at California, some of those areas are so expensive to live. You move up to the Fox cities, and Wisconsin, for instance, I was able to buy a house at my 1-year anniversary at Plexus. It was an old fixer-upper, and there's a lot of stories behind it, but I'll tell you, it was a really, really neat and great experience, and it just, that helped keep me here. It's the affordability, it's the education system, and it's, again, a lot of the really good people that we work with. Those are the types of things to make sure that we're kind of advertising as we're either recruiting talent or, again, as one of the key things that we do have within Wisconsin.
Peter?
Yeah, I think our biggest problem is if they come from south of the Mason-Dixon line, they think this is just a frozen tundra year-round. If you can get them here, they love it. Yeah, it's a much better cost of living, a nice place to live. But oftentimes, especially getting experienced engineers, they don't want to uproot to a northern climate. The other problem, I think, is just the size of our ecosystem right now in medical devices is not huge. So you go to Warsaw, Indiana, and you have Biomed, which is now Biomed Zimmer, DePuy, Medtronic. They all stay there, and they just keep rotating around because their ecosystem's all right there. But I think as this grows, it'll become a more favorable place to recruit from.
So I'm gonna come back to the two of you on the question in a minute, but I'd like to build on that for a second. When you think about, kind of further development of the ecosystem, and in essence, you're saying I want more competitors around me, right?
Competitors become collaborators.
So could you talk about that a little bit and what that looks like, and if you had a magic wand, how you might?
Well, I mean, it's a very fluid type of industry, so there are people at different points in their career that need different jobs. If you have a lot of industry in one place and you need somebody to move up to more of a managerial position, they might not have it in that company there, but they might not want to uproot and leave.
Yeah.
So they'll move around a lot more, yeah. Where your competitors become collaborators, actually.
Yeah.
Well, and it helps with things like benchmarking, right? So one thing we talk about a lot at Promega is benchmarking with others in terms of what are you doing, how are you doing it. That sort of networking becomes really important to us to understand. And it was the kind of relationship that Promega and Exact had when Exact was starting out. And Exact was like, well, how are you guys doing some of this stuff? We've both learned a lot from each other over the years, but it's that kind of synergy if you're working together on it that's exciting. Sorry I use synergy. I know it's an overused word, but that exchange is really meaningful.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, so I think to come back direct to the question of what does Wisconsin do better, I think what better positions us, it resonates with me, the culture, the work ethic. If I characterize that as the Midwestern values, that resonates. That I see that in my staff here, and that's something. That is a competitive advantage. You've heard a lot about the tenure of the companies here in Madison and broader Wisconsin. Clearly an advantage. I do think, to Peter's point, there's a lack of critical mass here. We don't see that the corporate headquarters, reference Chicago, right? 2 hours away, Lake County, Cook County, 100 pharmaceutical companies represented, 10 international headquarters. They have the critical mass. It certainly benefits that community. Those folks that are employed with those international companies, demand I think their salaries are on average 50% higher than the general population. So there's a benefit for reaching that critical mass for the employees, for the state, the tax bracket, the tax benefit to the state as a whole. So I think we should strive collectively, and I think that's part of Lisa's vision with BioForward, is to continue to nurture the biohealth organization, because it's going to benefit the state and all of our residents, but certainly the direct and indirect supply chain of biopharmaceutical. What other advantages or I'd say opportunities for us? I mentioned the economic incentives, certainly an opportunity there. I'd love to see us continue more funding for our academic research institutions. I think there was a figure just over $3 billion for funding coming into Wisconsin as a whole. Nice figure, the majority of that going to the University of Wisconsin system. Certainly more opportunities there. Venture capital funding, I think that data shows a clear opportunity for more startups here in the local community. I think within the U.S. last year alone, we topped $11 billion in capital venture funding. This year, we're projected to exceed $15 billion. Unfortunately, if you look at the last 5 years of data, only $300 million of venture capital funding came into Wisconsin. So a clear opportunity to leverage the foundations of research with our academic institutions and further develop those into companies.
How do you keep all those numbers in your head?
Don't fact check me.
Wow. It's like data man.
So I'm going to offer my answer to that question, and I'll offer it from my personal perspective. So, as somebody who works for a Lake County-based company and works out of their headquarters, I will also share with you that I'm a Wisconsin resident, and in making the decision in moving from General Electric to AbbVie, what were we going to do? I can tell you that my wife had a very strong influence over where we lived. And we live where we live now, which is Brookfield. And we live there for a couple of reasons. One is that the quality of life is deemed to be really great for us and our family. Secondly, is that the level of education that our kids have the opportunity to take advantage of is we think, incredibly strong. I joked, my two sons are high school age, and I joked with them that the offerings at their school, Brookfield East, is better than I had as an undergraduate. The kinds of things that they can explore. They're actually doing some amazing things in a number of the school districts in Wisconsin. One that I would just point out is they're actually having kids start businesses now. And it just really is remarkable the kinds of things that they can do, the opportunities they have, and the ability to stretch themselves in ways that I would argue 10, 15 years ago probably weren't evident to people. And I think that really was sort of the anchor, that kept us here. And then I think the third thing I would point to is the Green Bay Packers. As my kids would say, we're not leaving. We're going to be Packers fans. Okay, so other questions? Do I see a hand up? There we go. Okay.
Thank you. I had a question. So, coming from companies that have a global or even national footprint, you speak to, trying to introduce or leverage the opportunities in Wisconsin to push that initiative forward and attract the talent here. How do you do that in regards to, if you have internal competition too? You might have a site in California or Florida that is also looking to attract that same talent away from your site in Wisconsin. How do you, remove that bias?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one unique thing that we have is our corporate headquarters is in Wisconsin. So we've actually within the state here been a beneficiary of talent coming from our Raleigh sites, our Boulder, Colorado sites, even some of our sites in the UK and Germany have come over into the US and specifically into NENA as part of our corporate headquarters and part of the group. But what we try to do is make sure people get good global experience. Anybody who is going to be a long-term, what we call our Plexus leadership team. So we make sure that those people get a year or two in Penang, they get a year or two within Europe as well, really get that cross-training to experience multiple cultures and help make sure that everybody's, again, really thinking global. Again, really it's with our corporate headquarters in Neenah, Wisconsin, and our largest design center, it's actually worked really well from a talent importing standpoint.
So Mike, let me build on that question a little bit, and we'll come to the rest of you as well. I think that there may be sometimes a misnomer that if someone ever leaves here to go somewhere else, they never come back, right? That once they see something else, they're gonna be like, I'm not, it's too cold, it's too whatever. Do you find that at Plexus that you have, so you'll have colleagues who will go to another location and then they'll come back, is that correct?
Absolutely. So there are a few that have gone to Raleigh or Boulder, Colorado that have stayed there forever. I'm not going to lie about that. But there's also many, in fact, our current chief operating officer has spent time in Raleigh. He started that design center before coming back to Wisconsin. He then went to Germany, started our design center there before coming back to Wisconsin. And now, again, over time has advanced to our chief operating officer position. So we get a lot of people who do go other places. Some stay. The vast majority do come back. And again, a lot of it is probably because we do recruit from the Midwest, and this is kind of home for a lot of people.
Brian?
Yeah, I would add to that. I think seeing is believing. So we certainly, on a good portion of our talent recruitment efforts, try to get those folks out to Madison, see the area. Because, right, I often use the phrase, right, to know it is to love it. If you've been to Madison, and myself in 4 years have grown to love it as well. If you don't know it, some people have a negative bias to that. So to come here, see, Madison is beautiful, Wisconsin geographically is beautiful as well. So to take a look at that, seeing is believing, no doubt about it. For us within Catalent, the technology offering is quite appealing within our industry as well. So we've got people who want exposure to that technology, want to develop in that front, and that's what brings them here. And you don't necessarily find that at every geographical location around the globe.
Well, and often the people who are coming, are recruited from out of state, are people who are coming back. They're coming back because they like quality of life. And to me, the question from earlier too sort of dovetails into that about what can the state do. I think long-term commitment to quality of life is just as important as commitment to growing the businesses and the industries. A commitment to our infrastructure, to our environment, to our roads, to our education, all those things that say, when you come back, it's going to be just as great as when you left, is important to know it will be perpetuated. And so I think that's a piece of that.
And if I can add to that, I see quite a bit of what we call boomerang candidates as well. I mean, Madison was just ranked one of the best places to raise children in the U.S. And so you have folks that certainly, their ambition, their excitement gets the better of them, and they venture out. And I find them coming back because they want to raise and foster their families here.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir. Now, if that's not a model of cooperation, I don't know.
That's like a good relay going on there.
Thank you. So I had a question. How much emphasis is given to a candidate's skill set as opposed to their degree when you're looking to hire a candidate? Let's suppose a candidate has the right skill set for a job, but probably not the degree required. So I was just curious.
That's an interesting question.
I have a political science undergraduate degree, which shows you that you can have no skills, little education, and still get on a stage with fooling a lot of people. So kind of my reaction.
That's the political science part.
Yeah. So I think I will tell you, as someone who hires people, I pay very close attention to the skill set and how it's demonstrated. I do pay attention a little bit to education levels or the sort of the course of study, but it's really more about, do you understand what it is that you're about doing and how to go about it, probably more than exactly which school or which degree, just as a kind of a high level comment on it.
And I'll tell you one other kind of quick story about myself. So I was fortunate enough to spend a year overseas, and I was given a scholarship, and many of the others who received scholarships were from schools that were slightly more prestigious than Nebraska Wesleyan, where I went. And it took me about a month to figure out that they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like I did. So once I figured that out, we were able to have, kind of more meaningful conversations. So that's one person's answer to that. I'll open it up to you guys.
Yeah, if I can build on that, I think for me personally and at Catalent, we look at aptitude. Certainly the technical or the education is important, but even more so we look at attitude. And so we're looking for that cultural fit for potential employees when they come in that understand, the broader mission that we have, which is ultimately to serve patients. And if they are intrigued by that, if they're motivated by that, that's going to weigh heavily in our decision.
I'd love to build on that too, because I think chemistry is critical, and it's a weighable part of the consideration. So we even drift further from what is your degree to, yes, you need to have a sensibility for what it is, but will you be comfortable in this culture? Each culture is a little bit different, and that's such a critical part of the contribution. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar, and for us, it's you need the degree. You need a level of degree. You need that education for the basic skill set for say an engineering job or a industrial design job, whatever it may be. But then so much of it goes to attitude, culture, and for us, every one of our employees is in front of customers, working with customers every day. So it's a customer service attitude that everybody, all 600 engineers we have globally, need to have, because if they don't, and they upset a customer, they could pick up and leave the next day. So it's so critical that, yes, technical, talent, all those things, but they also have to be good to work with as well.
Peter?
Yeah, I think the education's always necessary, but it's not sufficient. So it's always what you did last that matters. It's not, you can't go all the way back to where you went to college or where you went to grad school. I mean, nobody asked me where I went to medical school. They asked how my last patient did.
Yeah.
And certainly, I didn't go to CEO school. I just kind of ended up here. It's what we do last.
So Peter, as someone who at some point in their career said, I'm doing this, and I have a high degree of confidence you did it well, and your patients did well, and were paid well, and all the rest of it, and you said, no. I'm going to risk everything, and I'm going to do this instead. Why, how, and what?
You're not going to ask me if I regret it, do you?
Do you want to? Up to you? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had a great job, and I really love doing spine surgery. Spine surgery is great because you can take somebody in terrific amount of pain and change their life with a half-hour surgery.
Yeah.
And it's become extremely reliable. Matter of fact, I went into it because I was training in late 80s, early 90s, and spine was in its infancy. We weren't that good at it back then, and a lot has changed. But I really just saw that this was going to make a much bigger difference in the industry. So I'm going to go back to the plastic versus titanium thing.
Yeah.
95% of patients are getting plastic in them. Plastic never heals. It is a foreign body that just stays kind of rattling around in there. So I made a living taking out other people's plastic. And the patients would invariably say, and my partners would say, they had the same experience. The patients would wake up and say, it's a completely different operation. So my wife was a pediatrician. She didn't want me to quit. She said, 51 years old, you finally figure out how to operate. You can't throw that away.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out I was doing two jobs and I wasn't doing either one very well. So I finally came home and I said, I can do another 5,000 surgeries. Maybe we could change the spine industry. And we have changed the industry already. It's only 70% of patients are getting plastic now, and everybody's developing titanium implants. Nobody's developing a biomimetic surface yet, but nobody's defending plastic anymore. So it's made a mark already. So no, I don't regret it. If you're asking.
Interesting. Other reactions? Okay.
Thank you.
We have a question over here, I think.
Yeah, the question I have is, if you read the paper, and if it's right, there are fewer and fewer students at young ages that are interested in math and science and technology. Do you think the BioForward group could play a role in stimulating education at lower levels, grade school, junior high?
I think we all could, actually, and I think certainly BioForward could, but in part that, at least in our world, that comes with that notion of long-term commitment. I was just talking with some colleagues from our BTC Institute, which is something that's been going since the 90s, talking about generating that education and that commitment to younger generations and learning about science and having hands-on opportunities in the lab that they would never have otherwise. So I think not only is BioForward a part of that equation, but I think we all are in helping generations learn about this industry and the opportunities for kids that are coming.
Yeah, I mean, I see part of this. It's the responsibility of industry as well. So, I mean, even things as basic as having engineers supporting a first competition where younger kids get to be involved. There's a Lego level for littler kids and a higher level robotic one for older kids in high school. You know, we've sponsored that for many years, and I think those type of things are really critical. Try to get people interested in science and math. It's the only way we're going to be able to kind of keep that level of talent is you got to start really young.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say if the mission of serving patients isn't enough, you know, the biohealth, biosciences is the second fastest growing technology sector out there next to computer services and software development. So, I mean, there's a real need for jobs in that area. It's a real benefit, you know, in lifetime and total lifetime earnings as well. I mean, there's many reasons the data is out there why they should want to join this field. But yes, I do think we can do a better job of educating folks at an earlier age. I mean, we are going to run a deficit in R&D positions to support the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I want to brag on the University of Wisconsin here for a minute because both of my sons actually went to an engineering camp on the campus over the course of the summer. And so if you have kids who are near sort of junior high age, I would encourage you to investigate it. They went away for a week. They were with kids their age from pretty much all over the state. And probably the hardest part was saying goodbye to them, you know, as we let them go on a Saturday and came back to pick them up the next Saturday. And both of them had just an amazing experience. And they got to go see applications of engineering in operation. They got to meet with professors who teach the space, and for both of them, it was really a wonderful experience. So I would argue, as someone who wasn't born in the state, that one of the opportunities areas for us here is to talk about it, to be okay saying that it's okay for us to be humble, but I also think it's okay for us to share, and so being able to identify those gaps, talk about how we're going to fill them, but also when things are going okay or going well, that we talk about it a little bit more. My experience as someone who didn't grow up here is that oftentimes that's sort of less evident, and it's easy to you know, kind of point out the foibles, so to speak, or you don't want to brag, you don't want to be viewed as someone, you know, touting, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I also think that there's room for us to do that. So go ahead.
I was just going to say we can do it in our own workplace. It just dawned on me. I was talking to colleagues in HR, and they're basically reframing the take your child to work day and bringing it back as more of a bring your sort of high school age children in to learn about what the prospects are for a future in this industry. So there are a lot of ways that we can provide and easily leverage what we have as experience into an understanding for our children. As a business, as well as the organizations like BioForward. So.
I want to go back to one thing.
Yeah, please.
Brian. So I think as an advocacy group, I think one of the things that can do the best is to link that what we're doing affects patients. So I remember in medical school, I saw one of the first defibrillators go in. It was expensive. It was very rare. You know, nobody will prove it. Now, yeah, you guys have brought the cost down 16-fold, but how many patients' lives was that saved by? You know, and they got to always kind of keep that link in there.
Yeah, good point.
And yeah, jobs are available, but it also makes a difference.
I think that's well said. I think one of the challenges that we face is that the innovation that we just experience is great until tomorrow, and then we wonder why it's not already better. And the good news is that's a human condition. The bad news is it's easy to lose perspective. So I'm going to ask each of you to maybe offer what insights you might be able to share, willing to share, when it comes to best practices for what we're doing here. You know, you had mentioned some other communities, and I know that others have talked about that in terms of, you know, kind of we do compete with those communities. What are the things that you've seen in other markets, either domestic or international, that you said to yourself, hey, we think we might be able to do some of that here, and what might that be, and any thoughts on what we might do about it?
Sure, I'm happy to kick that off, Matt. I'll go back. I think I mentioned incubator space. Massachusetts has over 24 incubators in that space. Almost everyone in the biotech community wants to open either their headquarters or their research center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because that is the epicenter. You have, the conjunction of multiple academic research institutions, and they're trying, collectively, they're fostering that. They want new companies, they want innovation, and they're providing the flexible, dynamic lab space to ensure their success. They're giving them access to, financial support as well, and it's having a fantastic result. So I know we've got a pillar here. I'd like us to expand on that.
Mm-hmm. Other observations?
I got a question.
Yeah.
I would imagine that if you have that incubator space, the capital follows that. So, I mean, like you were saying before, there isn't much venture capital here. There's not, I mean, if you want to raise money in this state and you have a company here, you have to leave here to go get it. I imagine there's lots of ample opportunity to raise capital if you also have that incubator space.
Correct, and I think having those connections, helping make those connections here locally within the state, because certainly we do have the innovation, we do have the talent. I think we do a poor job of making those connections.
There's an amazing program done by the marine biology labs out in Woods Hole in the East Coast, and we learned about it through a connection of a UW professor and longtime supporter with Promega. But the concept is that in the summer, key opinion leaders and real thought leaders in the industry who have some question they've wanted to interrogate but just don't have the time or the funding to do it, they bring a question like that to this summer program at the Marine Biology Labs in Woods Hole. And students apply to be a part of at least a summer of trying to answer that question. And they're working with some of the thought leaders of the world who are asking the questions they don't have time to ask in their day jobs. And that kind of a combination of work, both for the students and to further science, is inspiring. And we play a small role in that, but to watch that happen is magical for those kids. And I think it'd be great to bring something like that here.
All right. So when we think about venture capital, then, yeah, we'll get to you in just 1 second, I promise. So when we think about venture capital, what might we do to either bring more in or have more of it stay here? Any thoughts on how we might do that as we think about the infrastructure of the state?
I think some, 2/3 of those venture capital dollars are expended in Boston and San Francisco. I think having a presence there to help illustrate, the opportunity, the innovation out of Wisconsin would go a long way for bringing some of those dollars back home.
Okay. Other observations on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've done is, especially for some younger startup companies that we've worked with, just knowing that, hey, Plexus is behind us from a manufacturing standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, and then they know, hey, we don't have to invest in a bunch of design engineers and a manufacturing line and those things. That can be outsourced, and generally that's a lot less cost than ramping up a full team. So that's one thing too that I've seen in the past that, in fact, New Wave's one of the companies that we worked with very early on. They didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I can tell you another good data point that's fresh on my mind actually is the PhDs in life sciences, and I couldn't find specific data for Wisconsin, but it was interesting. Chicago was to the tune of graduating just over 500 PhDs in life sciences a year. Raleigh, North Carolina was the tune close to 750. Boston was closer to 1350, almost double. So PhDs in life science, because certainly companies, and they're looking to invest and expand, are looking, do you have the talent base to support that growth?
Thank you. Okay, I know someone was patient over here, wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, so I do have a question about economic impact of our industry in the state or in the region. Brian, you raised a really interesting point around the lack of corporate headquarters in Wisconsin for a lot of life science or biohealth-based companies. And I think in some ways that may hinder or limit the visibility of our companies if we have regional offices or plants or what have you in the area. It limits the visibility to the public and to state government to the importance of our industry and the economic impact we're having. So besides being a member of BioForward and the advocacy that BioForward offers, I'm wondering if any of you would share some of the practices your companies are utilizing to try to impact state government policy, and really what have you seen to work?
I'll take a shot at that, right? So I do government affairs, for a living. I'm a Wisconsin resident, work out of a headquarters office in Illinois. I know that when it comes to kind of a corporate headquarters type of issue, sort of the history of AbbVie, which is a spinoff from Abbott, which is a company that's more than 100 years old. They have their own sort of tradition, history, and culture there. What I would say is that in interactions with elected officials and those who are making decisions, certainly the number of headquarters is a positive thing. I don't mean to offer it as anything but that. But what I would also say is it's a combination of the work you do, the difference that you're making, and sort of how you're sharing your story. And I think that one of the challenges that we have in the life sciences is that, frankly, the science is complicated and oftentimes well beyond my capacity to understand it or explain it. And so it's how do you, in a very sort of brief moment, translate something that's extraordinarily complex and difficult to something that is understandable and simple. The typical elected official, if they're in a state capital, both here in Madison and around the country, they may meet with 30 different people on 30 different topics. And so they're just sort of overwhelmed with the information flow. And so they're making sort of shortcutting their decision-making process on who do I trust and do I get it. And so I think that BioForward is uniquely positioned, and Lisa and the team do a really nice job of helping to explain that in a way that is understandable. And as a result, I think we've had some meaningful public policy gains here in the state of Wisconsin relative to some of what I've seen around the country. So that's sort of one reaction I would offer that. The other is going to be completely outside of my lane, and I'm going to say something that I'm not legitimately authorized to say. And that is, if the expectation is that somehow the state of Wisconsin is going to encourage or get 500 different life sciences companies to go ahead and leave where they are and come here, I would not necessarily recommend that as a strategy, because I think you could spend the rest of your life trying to make it happen, and it may not. My preference would be that we help homegrown talent see the benefits of staying here and helping them sort of get from idea to solution. And that to the degree that we can help each other in that process, I think there's a lot more fertile ground that we might be able to till there. I'll pause there and ask you to.
Well, the ripple effects off of something like that are huge too. So we've talked about that a little bit before, but the notion of, Promega has stayed here for 40 years, and we have branches all over the world, but headquarters has stayed here. Over half of our suppliers today are in a 250-mile radius of the company. So that in Madison, so that says something about what that can do long term. So I love what you're saying, Matt, about, growing what's here, and then the connections that happen are really wonderful. Yeah.
All right, so I want to come back to your point about Chicago. As somebody who shows his passport every morning, crosses over the border, what might we do better to sort of leverage the size and scale of Chicago in what we do, here in the state of Wisconsin?
This has been an active discussion with the BioForward board. We're certainly, 2 hours away. And I think, a marketing campaign, to help educate some of those residents. I mean, even businesses within Chicago, as they're choosing to expand, aren't expanding, I'll say, their manufacturing footprint and their supply chain in Chicago. They're choosing to go to other metro areas that offer better cost of living, more access to talent base, for what they view as sustainable manufacturing. I know actually 2 recent companies that decided to build manufacturing organizations within North Carolina, Avexis out of Chicago, Bluebird out of Cambridge, Mass. Recently as well. But I think marketing those folks that we do have the talent base here, that we're close, a 2-hour drive away, and you can still help maintain that corporate culture within that arm's reach. That's a strong benefit.
Excellent. Other comments, observations?
Yeah, I mean, for us, being in the Fox Cities area, it's a very limited for, say, quality regulatory engineers, people like that. So we've had to recruit heavily from Chicago and Minneapolis as well in order to try to bring those people into NENA. It is not easy. It's been a big challenge, but every once in a while you get somebody who comes and goes, boy, I do really like this area, I like the company, I like the people, and you're able to get people to transplant. But we found that to be a big, big challenge.
Okay, we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one about the built environments. I heard several of you mention incubator space and corporate headquarters. I know some of you are doing expansions to your facilities, as you mentioned. What is it that we need either more of or better of from a built infrastructure, and where should that come from?
I'll take a shot at that, Matt. For me, it's the critical mass that we've referenced. I know if I just use GMP manufacturing skill set, and that comes with a broad range of support from facilities to engineering to our chemist, our quality control analyst, our microbiologist. So we have that full spectrum of supply chain and resources to grow that. But we don't have the critical mass. So we're having to train. Quite frankly, if I look at the big, employers, Promega, Covance, PPD, Exact, at least my sense is there's not enough talent base here, and so we are having to cultivate that talent internally. I think leveraging, as I mentioned earlier, Madison College, UW, North Carolina has an interesting program. It's called the BTech Center, Biotechnology and Education Center, where it's affiliated with the University of North Carolina, North Carolina State University, where you can actually get a minor in what I would call more of the applied sciences, where you actually will purify a protein, which is a true skill in the biomanufacturing sense. And so we need more of that, skilled, trained workforce, because a lot of that burden is falling back on those companies.
Other inputs on that question? Okay, any other questions? Yes, we do. Okay, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm a PhD student in economics in UW Madison, and in future I really wish to have a research in biohealth, and that's the reason actually I'm attending here. What you guys think that which are the particular specific areas which are yet to be explored in terms of research in the economics? I mean, as an economics graduate, I'm looking forward to have research in biohealth, and there are some areas which are yet to be explored. Can you please suggest something of that so it can help me in future? Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you to keep the microphone. I want to probe a little bit to make sure I'm understanding your question. So you're talking about research and economics research in the biotech space, is that correct?
Yes, right.
So I'll sort of take the first shot at this, right? So in terms of the research about the space and the research about us in Wisconsin, can it get better? I think the answer to that is yes. The team at BioForward has actually already taken some time to digest the economic development report that you received today, and we've already offered sort of comments and suggestions on that document and how it might be better in the future. Of course, that's got to be moderated by the budget that we have to invest in that research and our ability to get it done in a timely way. If it's not using sort of recent data, then the ability of that to be viewed as successful for the audiences that we're seeking to inform and educate can be limited in that way. And so I would argue that that's one area of opportunity for us. I think a second area of opportunity gets back into the point that we were talking about a little earlier, and that is how do we translate some of these very complex topics and make them understandable for those who are not in the space. I used to joke with my colleagues at GE, for example, I would ask them every once in a while to sort of hop off GE Island into the real world, where we might have an actual conversation about things that aren't sort of designed in an engineer way. Even though I knew that they were right, it wasn't going to lead them to be happy because people couldn't understand the point that they were making. So when I think about kind of the future and where an opportunity exists, I actually see a really strong opportunity for that translating space in between the work that we're doing and how we better tell the story in a compelling way. I think we do a good job of it, but I think that there's room for us to do it much, much better. Other comments on that?
Well, it seems that even when we were talking about the report earlier, it seems, defining what we mean, what we're measuring, and what we're looking at can change. It can move a little bit. And a part of that is maybe because folks don't have as much exposure and understanding of the industry and all the things it can encompass, or where you start and stop to draw that line. But to me, the other piece is discovery is happening so quickly, and application of biotechnology is happening so quickly that the line kind of keeps moving. I mean, how we see this industry working in our world today continues to evolve. And so that makes it difficult to measure as well, because it's becoming more relevant in more places, I think.
All right, so we're about at a close here. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to answer one final question, and that is, in looking at the economic development report and thinking about how you might hope it's applied, say over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, what are your hopes for that, and what can BioForward do to help?
I think the big thing is, and this happens at Promega too, but what's important is awareness, and is maintaining a level of awareness around what's out there and the impact of it. So continuing to share the story, the numbers don't necessarily give us the whole story, but they tell us there's a story to be heard. And that continues to perpetuate curiosity. So I would say just continuing to build awareness at this point and staying at it.
Yeah. Okay. Brian?
For me, I would share that report as broadly as I could. I mean, one takeaway from reading that report should be, an obvious takeaway is, I want more of that. I want more of the job creation. I want the higher median salary. I want the larger tax basing, all good things to translate to Wisconsin. So it should help spur some of that creativity, some of those other ideas of what we can do to help foster that. So it's a very positive report, and the obvious question is, how do we get more of that?
Mike? Yeah, absolutely. And what I like too is the flow down from there. So it's not just the first order effects of medical device and healthcare OEMs. I mean, it feeds down into companies like Plexus. It feeds down into our suppliers, be it Philips Medisize, Mayville, Steel up the street from here, all these companies. I mean, it really feeds down to multiple levels within the state. It really benefits it. So the higher salaries and all those things are important. It helps get attention, but it feeds all the way through the state, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to keep building off momentum, and a lot of that's based on optics, man. I love the incubator idea, and getting people convinced to stay here. I know when people say, why did I start a spine company in Mequon? Because it's the hotbed of spinal innovation. I don't want that to be a joke anymore.
That's great. All right, so I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd very much like to thank you for spending the time with us today and for your great questions. Thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you later on today. Thanks so much.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.